Good afternoon, and welcome all of you to these wonderful digs here at our historic William H. Welch Medical Library. And I'm very grateful that all of you have been able to join us for the dedication of the Giovannis Institute for Translational Cell Biology. For those of you who I haven't met, and I've been here seemingly forever, but I am Bill Nelson and serve as the Marion I. Knott Professor and Director of the Sidney Kimmel Comprehensive Cancer Center at Johns Hopkins. And as we get started, I wish to extend a special welcome to the President of Johns Hopkins University, Ronald J. Daniels, to the Interim Dean of our Medical Faculty and CEO of Johns Hopkins Medicine, Dr. Theodore Ted DeWeese, the Director of the Institute for Basic Biomedical Sciences, and the Michael and Ann Hankin and Partners of Brown Advisory Professor, Dr. James Berger, the Director of the Department of Cell Biology and Virginia Diacetis Professor, Dr. Andrew Ewald, and I would like to welcome our faculty leaders and colleagues from all across the institution. Welcome to all of you. And of course, I want to extend a very special welcome to a group fresh from a seminar in heavy-duty science, I have to tell you. A special welcome to Ted Giovannis and his children, Christina and Allie, and his family and friends, and the TGM team. Ted, thank you very much for your transformational commitment in founding this institute. We are dedicated to you and this institute this afternoon, Ted. I also wish to welcome the inaugural director of the Giovannis Institute for Translational Cell Biology, Dr. Andrew Ewald, who's here with his wife, Shannon Marshall, their children, Eleanor and Michael, his mother, Irene, and his brothers, Carl and Jonathan. Andy. Of course, today is a very exciting day for the School of Medicine, Johns Hopkins Medicine, and Johns Hopkins University. Institutes like this fuel discovery and are often the very connective tissue that brings everyone from the university together around key scientific discoveries and the promise of the future. The importance of this kind of investment cannot be overstated. Institutes like this are a critical component of maintaining our continued excellence at Johns Hopkins. We have these paintings of people that stare down at us to make sure we move forward. And today you're going to hear about the origin story of Ted and Annie's important vision to focus on the cause of roughly 2/3 of cancer deaths, which is this propensity for cancer cells to disseminate throughout the body, what we call metastasize, affect organ function, and threaten life itself. All of us believe that this is the right team at the right time to make a serious impact against cancer. And Ted, I'm grateful for your trust and inspiration in giving Andy and our team this challenge and this opportunity. Thank you. And anytime I'm looking for wisdom, I turn to our university president, Ronald J. Daniels. Ron.
Thank you, Bill, and welcome everyone to this truly, truly wonderful occasion. And you mentioned a moment ago, Bill, the hovering presence of the four doctors that are behind me. And of course, this is the monumental, the iconic John Singer Sargent painting, the founding four physicians that hang on the wall behind us. Now, the monumentality of this painting stems, I think, and we don't talk about this enough, but fundamentally from the fact that it is a group portrait. It is a reminder that our enterprise, which revolutionized medicine here and in the US and abroad, was from its earliest days never a solo endeavor, but a collective one. And it needed to be a collective project because it was so bold, so novel, requiring an entrepreneurial spirit and the talents of so many. Indeed, I think it's fair to say that when our School of Medicine was founded, its model of medical research, treatment, and education was indeed almost entirely untested. And more than a few people across the country were convinced, in fact, that it would fail. I think we can say confidently at this point that the experiment worked. Though I know Bill and James and others, Andy will remind me that in the true spirit of the scientific method, We don't want to say that anything is truly finally settled, but as a lawyer, Ted, I'll hope you'll forgive me for saying, for the purpose of this case, it's a fact. Hopkins Medicine succeeded because of the vision of the people involved, not least of whom were the four watching over us today. Welsh, Halstead, Osler, and Kelly each came to this place with their own area of expertise, from pathology to surgery to diagnostics to obstetrics. But they were bound together by a passionate and unyielding belief in the possibilities in scientific and medical research to save lives. Indeed, basic science was deemed to be critical to this historic endeavor from the outset. As Welsh once said, many of the most important discoveries of science, in science, come from investigators of truth for its own sake. Hopkins was at its core a bet on human ingenuity, human curiosity, and human compassion, a bet that has paid off countless times in the decades since. Today, we have the privilege of dedicating an institute that represents an extension and renewal of that original vision. The Giovannis Institute for Translational Cell Biology, which will harness and amplify our university's expertise in basic biological science, as well as a host of other fields to understand and advance treatment for metastases. As with any investment in basic science, this one involves risk. But we're fortunate that the animating force behind this institute is someone who has never shied away from making big bets on big, bold, and untested ideas, and that's you, Ted. A celebrated business leader, a renowned health policy advocate, a finance and regulatory expert with decades of experience in hospital management, and naturally, a race car driver, Ted, it is safe to say, is comfortable with calculated risks. Throughout his long and storied career, Ted has navigated, shaped, and held to account complex organizations. He knows what makes institutions work and what to do when they don't, whether he is leading legislation against the federal government to ensure that hospitals receive necessary payments, or streamlining his pit crew for Team TGM. Ted's vast expertise and singular background have been critical at every stage of developing the Institute, which marks a transformative investment in basic science designed to help us tackle, as said a moment ago and Bill explained, the single most fatal aspect of cancer, metastases. The Giovannis Institute is an opportunity to make huge leaps. It is built to be nimble, to reward curiosity, and to adapt to new information and new discoveries. It represents a bold new step in the fight against cancer. And like Hopkins Medicine itself, it will not be the work of just one person. As Ted understands, at a scientific institute, as on a racing crew, every member must, to borrow Ted's words, do their tasks, do them timely, and do them well. The Giovannis Institute promises to be a truly exceptional team, and we could not ask for a better person in the driver's seat than Dr. Andrew Ewald, or is it crew chief? I'm not sure, Ted, you'll advise me on what the right metaphor is. Dr. Ewald has devoted his career to studying the function and spread of cancer cells in ways that have significantly advanced our understanding of metastases. In addition to his impressive research credentials, he is also a gifted leader, mentor, and teammate, someone who really understands the esprit de corps of the Founding Four. Andrew, we look forward with great anticipation to your leadership at the Institute. And Ted, thank you again for investing in Hopkins, for your unwavering belief in the potential of basic science, and for your continued partnership here at Johns Hopkins Medicine and indeed across our institution. On behalf of our university and our countless patients who will reap the benefits of the work of this institute, let me express my very sincere, my very deep gratitude for this tremendous act of philanthropic vision. We're in your debt. And now, it's my pleasure to welcome to the podium our interim dean of the medical faculty, Ted DeWeese. Ted.
Thank you, Ron. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. It is really a pleasure to be here with all of you to celebrate this really important milestone in the history of basic sciences here at Hopkins. But I think more than that, really, it is helping us achieve a larger milestone of our view and our vision to reimagine basic sciences for all of Johns Hopkins. And this is a real critical moment. And it wouldn't be possible, Ted, as you've heard many times today, without you, without your vision and your support. So thank you very, very much. Ted and I have come to know each other, I don't know, slightly reasonably well recently, and more to come. We share a lot of things besides our hairdo together, which we do, no doubt. One of which, of course, is our first name, Theodore. As you know, in Greek, that means gift of God. I'm just saying. Enough said, maybe, I don't know. But what is less obvious, and Ron was reflecting a little bit on it, is our shared experience in racing and cars, etc. You've heard about Ted's now, I think you told me 28 years, something like that, racing?
Since 91.
Since 91. So very experienced. My own as a Ford mechanic, and when I got out of high school, did that for a number of years, and auto parts and race motorcycles. So we have several things in common. And Ron touched on the other piece of, I think, why our personalities tend to meld beyond some of those things, is the notion that it is multidisciplinary. If you're going to pull something off as important as racing, you have to have a crew that does it. You got to have a budget in which you're going to work. You have to take, as Ron knows, some calculated risks and assumptions and a lot of data that goes together to figure out what's the next step. And obviously, my own lab, all of our collective labs, that's exactly what we do. A lot of people come together, review the work, do some data analysis, work within a budget most of the time, and that was really too close to home at the moment. Too soon. Yeah. And get the results that we need. And so, Ted, I really appreciate the friendship that we have developed around that. But on the racetrack, you heard Ted's been the owner and a driver for Team TGM, and I believe some of your colleagues are here, and it's really wonderful to have them here today. And off the course, Ron noted Ted's long and illustrious career in health policy in the industry. Anybody who is a serious expert in Medicare and Medicaid regulatory processes and financing is like 2 notches above the rest of us in the room, because it is hard stuff. And Ted, you did some very important things for the state early on. We were talking about that a bit at lunch. And so we could really use somebody like you back in the seat to help us in these days too, I could tell you that. I don't know, as we've heard, but Ted did found the JKTG Foundation for Health and Policy, which has as its general core ultimately trying to improve the quality of care and the health outcomes for people. Not more, not less. That's a very straightforward one. And much of the foundation's focus is really on those first 2 initials of JK, which is focused around cancer treatment, which was the unfortunate number of years that Ted's late wife, Jane, the mother to Allie and Christy, experienced for 10 years with her battle with breast cancer. I'm sure that was extremely painful for all of you, but really is in large part, the genesis of your personal focus, your philanthropic support. I didn't have the opportunity to meet her. I've heard she was a wonderful woman, so part of this day is in dedication to her too. So it's really wonderful. Through the foundation, the Giovannis family has supported basic science research here at Hopkins for a long time. When I was a department director in radiation oncology, actually Ted was a big supporter of Dr. Ivkov and some of the nanoparticle work we were on together, so thank you for that, Ted. The Giovannis Institute for Translational Cell Biology at Hopkins, led by, as you've already heard, really truly one of the most outstanding researchers we have, Dr. Andy Ewald, and all of his team are looking at this critical piece that Jane experienced. How is it? What are the basic mechanisms that drive cancer metastases? Because until you can solve that piece of it, you're never going to solve the larger one and translate it into the clinic and minimize the untold pain of patients and their families with cancer metastasis. And that's why this particular gift is so doggone important. The transformative gifts, Ted, that people like you have provided to Hopkins is really critical to the who we are. This place doesn't exist. Those 4 don't come here without the philanthropic vision of people like Johns Hopkins. And so you now find yourself into that because this is, as you've heard, the largest single gift for basic science research at Johns Hopkins history. Ted, thank you very much. So Ted, I'm enormously grateful to you, to your family, for the philanthropic investments in basic sciences at Johns Hopkins. I know how much this means to all of you. Definitely, I can see that very much. Christy and Allie, thank you for that. I'm so glad we're all here together to celebrate it. The future is very, very bright for the basic sciences at Johns Hopkins, and I'm just glad that the Giovannis name is associated with that future. So thank you very much, and I'll turn it back over to Bill Nelson.
Well, thank you. Gift of God. I'm so with that one there for a second. Thank you, Ron and Ted. And at this time, I would like to invite Ted Giovannis, President Daniels, and Interim Dean DeWeese, and Andy Ewald up to confront this mystery here, in every way a metaphor for life's mysteries that can be revealed by discovery. So if you all can line up there for a wonderful photograph. And I can say congratulations. And like a discovery, you're going to reveal. Now that looks nice.
That's fabulous, Ted. I think the G needs to be a little bit bigger in that, though. But also at this time, I have the great pleasure to ask Dr. Ewald to come over, and we'd like to recognize Dr. Ewald as the inaugural director of the Giovannis Institute for Translational Cell Biology. Andy, congratulations.
All right, we have more. At this time, I would like to introduce the Michael and Ann Hankin and Partners of Brown Advisory Professor, Dr. James Berger. James.
Thank you, Bill. It is tremendously exciting to be here today and to see this event come to fruition. As Bill noted, I'm James Berger, the Director of the Institute for Basic Biomedical Sciences and a professor in the Department of Biophysics and Biophysical Chemistry. This is really an incredible day for basic biomedical research, and in particular the Department of Cell Biology. Simply put, TED's investment in this new institute will transform the way that researchers can find answers to important scientific questions that underpin the root causes of cancer. And those answers are not only pertinent to cancer, but indeed to biological life as we know it. This past summer, when TED's gift was announced, a Baltimore Banner story led with the headline, "Can the spread of cancer be stopped?" That question is fundamentally one that requires basic science to answer. And Andy and Ted's answer, I believe, would be an emphatic yes. First, we need to understand the basic biology of how cells move from one place to another. Then we need to understand how cancer cells co-opt that natural process to escape the primary tumor and travel to distant sites in the body, an event that leads to the spread of cancer throughout the body and ultimately to cancer mortality. Thus, we need to understand basic biological processes involving how cells adhere to other cells, how cells squeeze through blood vessel linings, how cells use blood vessels as a highway to get to other parts of the body, and how cells trick the immune system into letting them stay at that distant site in the body. These are textbook problems and questions that require fundamental experimental studies to answer. Andy and his colleagues at Johns Hopkins have already begun to lay the groundwork for defining the key issues underpinning metastasis and realizing these answers. For example, they showed that much like kindergarten teachers trying to corral their young charges on a field trip, cells that line the milk ducts in breast tissue actually can reach out and grab on to errant cancer cells as they try to escape and pull them back into the lining so that they don't spread chaos throughout the body. If you've ever heard kindergartners, you know what chaos is about. You can imagine that discovering the molecular and genetic components that help healthy cells rein in jailbreaking cancer cells will help us devise strategies to keep cancer localized. Or if we can detect the appropriate molecular and genetic markers, determinants in people with breast cancer, we could identify patients who are at higher risk for metastasis. All of these processes have roots in basic biology, but the path for these discoveries have an impact. But the fact that these discoveries have as an impact on people with cancer is clear. TED's investment in this space is part of a long-standing commitment and realization that the translation and application first require fundamental understanding, and that it is this understanding that can only come from basic scientific inquiry. In other words, we need investments in basic research to understand why disease arises before we can figure out how to cure it. TED's commitment to this view began with his establishment of the Jane Koskinas Ted Giovannis Foundation for Health and Policy, which funds basic cancer research and a rethinking of healthcare quality and effectiveness. The new Giovannis Institute continues and expands on this legacy, laying the groundwork for discoveries by scientists in the Institute to be leveraged by other scientists around the globe to end the scourge of cancer metastasis. And make no mistake, this type of visionary philanthropy is key to bridging the very real and very problematic gap in declining federal funding for basic science research. Indeed, donor-driven contributions are often the only way to support ideas that are deemed too risky or untimely, pejoratives that take these ideas out of the scope or will of funding agencies. So thank you, Ted. Thank you for your generosity and investment in Andy and the Department of Cell Biology. Your vision serves as an inspiration to other philanthropists to follow in your path and create similar groundworks of basic research funding for supporting future generations of scientists. The scientists of the future are sitting here in this audience. Andy has assembled a team in the Giovannis Institute that spans other departments and schools of the university. We know this will be an exceptional group that will build an exciting path to ending the spread of cancer. And now I'd like to introduce the inaugural director of the Giovannis Institute and director of the Department of Cell Biology, Andy Ewald.
Thank you. Good afternoon. It's a joy, genuinely a joy, to welcome you to the dedication of the Giovannis Institute for Translational Cell Biology. I am honored that each of you are here on this momentous occasion. I want to especially recognize my wife, Shannon, my children, Eleanor and Michael, my brothers, Carl and Jonathan, and my mother, Irene. When I'm with you, wherever we are, I'm home, which is real important because science is a heck of a nomadic lifestyle. I also want to thank friends from different eras of my life, from high school to college to grad school to postdoc, who've all made it in Baltimore, who've made time out of their busy day for the least convenient timing of an institute dedication, 2:30 on a Monday. So I really appreciate that. So why are we all here? Put very simply, it's because cancer is an ancient and merciless enemy. It's been coming for us since way before we had language. Cancer comes for those we love, and too often it wins. That's it, full stop, that's why we're here. We're here establishing an institute to study cancer metastasis because metastasis is the final cause, common cause of most deaths from cancer. It's what's really driving outcomes. Localized tumors, meaning the tumors staying in one place in the original organ, typically have outstanding patient outcomes because of everything that's been learned in the hospital. Conversely, cancers that have spread throughout the body remain very challenging to treat, despite the best efforts of researchers and clinicians worldwide. The missions of the Giovannis Institute are threefold. The first is to understand the causes of cancer metastasis. The second is to develop innovative new strategies to prevent or treat metastasis. And the third is to change the culture of scientific research to embrace high-value risk in pursuit of transformative advances. It really is deeply appropriate to have Ted and Team TGM and their drivers here today, because the stakes are too high, right? People are absolutely literally dying every day. We need to figure out what our best options are, and we need to take them. So I met Ted at a workshop he organized called Applied Mathematics and Germinating Oncology Solutions. If that's too complex, it's also Amigos. So Ted's approach then and now is to identify mission-focused, collaborative scientists who will work together to solve the hardest problems in cancer. Our partnership first arose from that meeting in the form of a grant from the Jane Koskinas Ted Giovanis Foundation. During the COVID-19 pandemic, we started talking and texting and emailing more regularly, and Ted and I began talking about what we could do together at a different scale of researchers and duration in time. And today is the realization of his vision and his transformative investment. And we've already started. The Giovanis Institute has already been able to recruit Mikla Egeblad from the Cold Spring Harbor Lab as a Bloomberg Distinguished Professor, establish the Florence Sabin Lectureship, support visiting scholars from Japan, Finland, and Portugal, and select its first investigator, Peter Espenshade. In the years ahead, the Giovanis Institute will establish 3 endowed professorships in the Department of Cell Biology, recruit junior faculty in the area of cancer metastasis, and support metastasis research across the school and indeed the university through competitive grant applications. We're most interested to find the best ideas from people we haven't already met, right? This is a phenomenal institution. And I have to say, at moments like this, I get reflective. It's actually quite sobering to stand in front of this room and say out loud what that mission was. So I'll admit that when the papers were all signed, right, this is something that builds over 6 years, right? And sitting there in the car, it came through, all the documents are signed, the gift's there, the investment is there. And I thought, this is it, right? No more excuses. We're gonna find out if I'm smarter than cancer. Those of you who've known me since high school, college, grad school, that'll sound very familiar. Those of you who know me more recently, there's been progress. Then I took a deep breath, the fit passed, right? And I realized that's entirely the wrong question. It isn't about me, it's about we, right? It's about the people in the lab doing the experiments. I've gotten very good at drinking coffee. Pretty good at answering emails, very good at drinking coffee. People in the lab doing the experiments, the physicians and surgeons who've taught me what I know about the clinical disease. The engineers and mathematicians that, as we saw at the symposium today, let us do what I cannot, right? I was once good at mathematics, but not that good. I truly believe that we are at a moment where we can make major advances in our understanding and treatment of metastatic cancer. And now I'm going to say the quiet part out loud. The hardest part of a moment like this, for a lot of us here, right, is the combination of optimism for the future, what can be, with the weight of the losses of the past, right? There's nothing we can do in the Giovanis Institute that'll let us go back in time and save those who we've already lost. Our father, since my brothers are both here, was diagnosed with metastatic cancer in my first year on the faculty, about a month in. His cancer had already spread vigorously throughout his body, and current treatments were not effective for him. I wish he could have been here to share this day. I take some solace in the idea that I honor his memory each day in the work that we do. Now, Ted, right? Thank you. You have transformed my life and the lives of dozens of researchers around the country and several in this room. I couldn't ask for a better partner. And I couldn't ask for a better setting to launch this institute. We didn't totally coordinate our remarks, so I was very fortunate that this stayed for me. So I stand literally and figuratively at the feet of Doctors Osler, Halstead, Welsh, and Kelly, the 4 doctors who are deemed to have been most central to the founding of the Johns Hopkins Medical School. They had the training, they had the vision, they had the ability, they had the guts to transform medicine. Here's something we don't always say. Johns Hopkins didn't leave money for the founding of the Johns Hopkins School of Medicine. He left it for the hospital and for the university. And some of you have probably wondered who that is, right? Why is there another John Singer Sargent painting in this room, right? So it turns out that's Mary Elizabeth Garrett, fortunately in her presence as well, whose vision and generosity enabled them to launch this school. It's her money that founded this school. And Ted, by taking this momentous step, you are continuing the finest traditions of partnership upon which Johns Hopkins Medical School has literally always been built from day one. I look forward to what we'll do together through the Giovanis Institute, and it is now my distinct privilege to welcome my friend and collaborator, Ted Giovanis.
Well, they said it all, so I don't have anything to say. No. So when my first reaction was when Andy and I talked about this, and we were actually in this very room on his occasion of his professorship, I said, I got to give a talk. And he said, well, not only if you want to. So I decided that we should do it. And I said, what am I going to talk about? And he said, basically, talk about your motivations and your aspirations for the Institute. And so that's what I'm going to do. So I can tell you that my why is not a particular specific thing. It's evolved over decades, literally. And I am sort of the sum total of a lot of the experiences that I've had in my life that has gotten me to where science is today. You know, from previous remarks, I was a health policy guy, I was a lobbyist, I did a lot of different things. None of that is in the medical research and health space. So when I look back and said, how did I get here, I came to the conclusion that there were three distinct phases. Some not related, but others related. One was I had great mentors, people that I could learn from, people that allowed me to explore, to investigate, to become better at what I was doing. And so I tried to create the same environment like that for the people that worked for me when I was in healthcare. And I think I did that. Another phase, early in my career in the 80s, I worked a lot on the Medicare program and worked with the Medicare actuaries. These are arcane people that know rules before they're rules. They get data from legions of economists and about mortality rates, birth rates, all kinds of stuff, and they feed them in actuarial models to try to project trust fund forecasts for 75 years. Modeling is the word. In policy development, when I was in that phase of my career, we would develop different changes in policy, which are basically stimuli for behavior changes for patients, for insured people, and we would also figure out what any unintended consequences of those policies might be, and then develop countervailing strategies, and then all of that we would model to try to figure out, are we going in the right direction, or do we need to make a change somewhere? So can you see some of the similarities to where we all have gotten today? Phase two. After litigation I was involved in, which was 6 years between 2006 and 2012, when that got monetized, I decided to create the Jane Koskinas Ted Giovanis Foundation for Health and Policy. And we got our tax exemption approved in 9 weeks when they told us it would take 9 months. So we jumped into the policy space, and we did tons of policy work for about 1.5 years. And then in mid-14, I became concerned that we were way overweighted in policy, and we needed to go into the health space. And that began the learning and the evolution of my experiences in the health space and where we sort of intersect today. So 2 stories are illustrative. I was listening to a recording of a talk by Rob Ifkoff, who happens to be here, at the Library of Congress. And about 8 or 10 minutes into the Q&A, he got a question from the floor. His work is in nanoparticles, and he was exploring mouse models and the effects of nanoparticles. And the question from the floor was, well, if a nanoparticle looks like a virus cell to the immune system, how do you know if the mouse had a competent immune system, it would allow entry to the nanoparticle? And Rob said, that's like a really good question. He says, as a matter of fact, I've been troubled by that for about 1 year. As a matter of fact, further, I've submitted 3 proposals and no one will fund it. Well, to me, it seemed like a handy piece of information to have if you were going to use this and apply it therapeutically to a patient. You'd need, without compromising their immune system, you need to know these things. So what wound up happening is I met with Rob, and literally within weeks, we funded a project to find out just that. And that was the beginning. It's the emphasis is nobody will fund it, and it was exploratory, Maybe it was risky, but we needed to know if it sounded like a reasonably good idea. So, two things I learned from that was funding projects targeted on fundamental questions can yield pretty good results. And number two, I guess I should add, that project and some of the successor projects that we've had changed the whole thinking with regard to nanoparticles and what they thought they would do, including its effect on the immune system. So it changed the thinking there, and that's the second thing I learned was we're all victims of what we think we know rather than what we know. So that's why we get to where we are here, phase 3. Phase 3 is my experiences dealing with the JKTG Foundation and the research that we've sponsored over the years. Virtually every time I get a proposal, I have the same reaction to the hypothesis that's being proposed. We don't know this already? And we don't. And so that's sort of part of our problems. And knowing the answer to this, and I think you've heard it ad nauseum from at least 3 speakers, 4, all of the 4, is in the area of basic science and exploratory nature, the exploratory nature of finding out how things work the way they do. And once we know that, maybe we can figure out what to do therapeutically for it. It drives a whole cascade of other decisions that clinicians can deploy. So, ironically, it's these basic science investigations that lead to the biggest leverageable discoveries. So it's not just to know it, but can we do it? Also a factor, generally speaking, is the research funding mechanisms we have are risk adverse. They want surer things, if that's a word. And we're going to work in the Giovannis Institute to change that, to make it, in our work, as Andy said, initially in breast cancer, and then working in metastasis and other cancers, but also in how we make decisions and how it influences how we think about projects and how discovery and how we're going to make investments. So my personal thinking is you invest in great, curious people. You give them an environment to work in and allow them the flexibility to explore. And they'll come up with something because that's who they are. So enabling great interdisciplinary, that's another key word, researchers that have a collaboratory mindset. And you have to want to work together, not be in silos, not be in tribes, but work together, recognizing that when you fund these types of investigations, will accelerate the time from proposal to investigation to approval to funding to results. So you're going to accelerate that timeline. So most of you who have known me in our foundation know we don't take too long. It takes some of the people in Bethesda 9 months, it takes us 9 hours. So guess what? We gained 8 months. So even if we find out something that's wrong. And so the other thing is knowing what not to do is just as important as knowing what to do. As long as we tell each other that, if this is not the right way, I gotta tell Andy the way. For example, if he's working in the same area. So we want to do this to find out more faster. And along the way, a plus, we'll develop a cadre of great researchers working for the whole institute and for the process. So the Johns Hopkins, as you've heard, Johns Hopkins leadership is committed to this in Presidents Daniels and Dean DeWeese. They share my view of the role of basic science and the ability to explore. And so, in pretty much summary, collaborations across Collaborations allow cross-fertilization of disciplines, knowledge, and understanding of what works and what doesn't work, all of which fosters a greater understanding, learning, and growth. Number 2, smart, motivated people that have the ability to explore will yield great results. Number 3, while we are all stewards of scarce resources, we do need to take some risks. And number 4, we should all never stop learning and growing, because that's where the answers are for all of us. So personally, I want to make a difference. I'm trying to make a difference. I find I can, and I'm trying to fill the role. I want to work with Andy, but not to do what he does. I want to learn from what they do, because it helps me learn and grow and in other dimensions of my life, because I'm still evolving. I haven't stopped yet. I'm still growing. I'm still learning. So a few thank yous along the way. Of course, Jane, of course, Allie and Christina, of course, Rosalind, and certainly Dr. Ewald and the research at the Giovannis Institute. And now I'll leave you with a quote from Confucius. The man who moves a mountain begins by carrying away small stones. So let us begin carrying away those small stones for the benefit of patients. So thank you very much. I'm happy to be able to do this, and thank you all for coming.
Well, on behalf of the Johns Hopkins University and its School of Medicine, thank you all for being a part of this historic dedication ceremony. And as I stand at this podium under the watchful eyes of our 4 founding doctors and Mary Elizabeth Garrett, I can say with great confidence that this is truly a wonderful day for Johns Hopkins. And it's going to prove to be an absolutely god-awful day for metastatic cancer cells as we go forward. So thank you all for joining us. Please join us for a reception in the back. Thank you.